If you have the funds, what, if any, are the downsides to purchasing an investment property with cash?
None if you've got heaps of it.
You got heaps of cash and that's the way you want to go, you're going to have cash flow positive from day one. Let's put it that way.
Fantastic.
So there's
a great
positive, it's going to be an income generating asset, whereas many investment properties the rent doesn't cover the costs. So they're negatively geared, if you like. There's a shortfall between the income that you get and the outgoings. But what you're missing out on if you do that, if you use all of your cash, so let's just make an assumption here that it's all of the cash that you're using for an investment property, you're actually missing out on leverage and the more minor benefits that come from tax deductions, or having a disparity between in an investment property and income being less than what the outgoings are. So if you're in the asset accumulation phase of your life, which is, most people before retirement are accumulating assets, you want your cash to work as hard as possible for you. So you need to talk to an accountant, from a tax perspective and cash flow, talk to a broker about structuring mortgage structures and borrowing power. And you might actually find that in this asset accumulation phase of your wealth, building your wealth, you may be better off borrowing money and using your cash to purchase more assets. Now, that's not our advice. This is our suggestion to go to the people who know in their lane what they're doing.
I'll give you an example on that a client of mine did some years ago, came into an inheritance, quite a lot of money, which is fantastic for them.
Yeah.
And they came to me and said, right, we want to buy an investment property with this money. And I'm like, okay, I know that, and I'd already bought their home for them some years earlier. So I knew they had other assets and the rest of it. And I said, I know that you've got this money and that's great. I'd like you to go and get some other advice on the money side of things. I can advise you on the property side of things, but on the money side of things, I want to make sure you got good advice on there, because I know that if you can borrow money, and not all of it, but some, you can buy more than one, and you can actually be cash flow positive even buying more than one and by borrowing some money, right? So they actually went away and they were very conservative by nature, and they ended up borrowing, they ended up borrowing the same amount of money.
Okay.
So they had two properties.
About a 50% LVR?
Basically, yeah. Actually, borrowed slightly less. And, ended up being 50% LVR anyway after costs. And the rent covered the mortgage, the money that they borrowed. So they'd been gifted this money, which was amazing, obviously through an inheritance. And they could have spent the whole thing on an investment and got income, but they didn't need that income, because he had a good job and already had their home, right? And so it was like, we don't need the income now, but we want it when we retire. So we'll borrow and we'll buy two, and it's not costing us a cent. And that was the solution for them in their circumstances. So, and yet
so they could have got a good quality asset, single good quality asset, but instead they've ended up with two good quality assets. And
the borrowing is just ticked away. The income, the rent is just paid off that debt. And now I think, because that was about 10 years ago now, that both those properties now, I'm thinking about what we paid for them and what they're worth now, they would have doubled in value as well in that time.
Yeah.
Not everything doubles in value in 10 years. Okay,
well, that's where the asset selection comes in.
That's exactly right. But so that was that's a good example, a case study, if you like.
Yeah, so Diane, I guess the answer to the question is go and get some advice from an accountant and a broker about what your options are, and then see which one works for you depending on what phase of your life you're in, and what you're actually wanting that investment property to achieve for you. So that's go and talk to a financial advisor, accountant, broker.
And we'll add one more thing. If, say, you have a small amount of cash, say you've got, say, $400,000, right? And in the area in which you would buy, to buy a really great property, you'd need an extra $100,000. So under circumstances like that, if by paying cash you end up buying an inferior quality property and you can afford to borrow, that is another reason that's another disadvantage of buying in cash. When and if with the right advice, you could borrow a smaller amount of money and actually buy a better asset.
Yeah, good advice. Again, go back to the experts in their field, not your colleague at the water cooler.
No.